And IHLA uses the flexibility and creativity with its operations to facilitate creativity and flexibility in meeting student needs. However, this flexibility and creativity comes in a policy and legal gray area.
Well, that gray, fuzzy area was the focus of a 3-hour joint legislative oversight committee hearing Tuesday at the Idaho State House. At question, whether families enrolled in the Idaho Home Learning Academy, or IHLA, were using state funds appropriately for their child's education. You see, therein lies the gray area, because what's appropriate hasn't been well defined. We'll get to that, more on that in a moment. But first, a brief primer on virtual academies in Idaho. Idaho's first foray into online charter schools began in 2002 with the opening of the Idaho Virtual Academy. Like a regular school, there'd be no cost to attend. All you needed was a computer and an internet connection. Didn't have one? Well, back then, the Idaho Virtual Academy would provide both. The Virtual Academy got its charter from the Butte County School District with the goal of providing rural students access to a more enriched education. Programs not offered in their local schools because of a lack of money or staff.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee.
It was with that same intent, individualized learning, that the Oneida School District partnered with the Idaho Home Learning Academy back in 2016.
This enrollment data clearly demonstrates that Idaho families are voting with their feet. They are actively seeking more educational choice and greater parent involvement.
The Malad, Idaho-based online school began with about 200 students. But enrollment exploded during the pandemic, while brick-and-mortar schools closed or required masks. Today, based on enrollment, IHLA is the largest single public school in the state. Here's how it works. Parents get an education savings account seeded with $1,700 to $1,800 per student to be used for educational expenses like books, software, or tutoring, or, according to a 2023 Idaho Department of Education report, even chicken coops, rabbit hutches, kitchen supplies, or a digital piano. That money comes from Idaho taxpayers, siphoned off the normal state per-student spending. Well, when it comes to public spending, Haley Sweeten told the committee yesterday Idaho Home Learning Academy gets about $6,150 per student from the state, and that's based on the funding from the 2024-2025 school year. That's the first year IHLA became a charter school. That's less than $9,800 Idaho spends per student. That's according to the number from 2022. So back to that meeting from yesterday. Back in March, several state lawmakers asked the Office of Performance Evaluations to look into IHLA based on what they'd been hearing for years. For example, before it was a standalone charter school, IHLA's enrollment numbers were attached to the Oneida School District, meaning Malad, which is a town of about 2,300 people, was getting school funding based on 8,000 students. So this group of lawmakers wanted to know more about the academy's finances, its policies, its contracts, and how its students stacked up in academic achievement. Many might say this kind of scrutiny is overdue. Even the OPE director told the committee yesterday the state of Idaho has been giving parents money to support virtual education since at least 2007. And that was also the last time they looked at virtual school policies. Well, the OPE came up with a 129-page report that could serve as a cautionary tale for Idaho's upcoming school choice tax credit. Here's Joe Paris.
A deep dive into the Idaho Home Learning Academy, IHLA, revealed gaps in accountability of tax dollars used by the state's largest virtual charter school. The in-depth report from the Office of Performance Evaluation was clear that no laws or codes have been violated, but existing rules need to be tailored for this innovative concept. It's a complex picture of a program that has proven popular with families, but operates with questionable oversight, namely money distributed to families by contracted service providers for educational materials, activities, and services.
The schools are operating as they've been allowed. And so, as we heard today, from the governor's office to the state board to the Department of Education, everybody's going to roll up their sleeves and figure out how to ensure that taxpayer dollars are transparent and accountable to the public.
Senator Melissa Wintrow co-chairs the Joint Legislative Oversight Committee. They listened for hours about the findings, and some things stick out.
They're utilizing a funding formula or a way to fund the school that probably isn't quite appropriate.
Idaho's funding formula doesn't have a specific mechanism for virtual charter schools. Schools like IHLA see benefits over brick-and-mortar schools on things like financial distributions based on attendance and distinctions between money allocated for full-time and part-time employees. It leads to a collection of questions about schools like IHLA, but they are schools that parents and teachers say have been a major benefit for their students.
A lot of us that are teachers, we started as parents. So it's kind of, a lot of us, we got into the teaching for them because we were passionate and we saw the program work.
Shelley Britton is a K-8 teacher with IHLA.
Are you concerned, I guess, listening to the extended presentation that there could be oversights or things that would compromise IHLA?
I was very nervous in the beginning. It seemed very negative, but I was encouraged by the end that we're all in this together. We're trying our hardest to find a happy medium of being able to answer all of these questions and make a way for this virtual education to still exist.
IHLA leadership appreciates the questions.
Okay, tell us what we can do different. If we're doing something we shouldn't, tell us to do it different. If there's a way we can improve.
Dr. Terry Sorensen is executive director of IHLA.
It's new. It's something new. And so we expected them to look at it and say, hey, this could be done differently, or maybe this piece could look better.
Haley Sweeten is set to take over the role of executive director soon, and they both understand questions about how taxpayer dollars are used. The report found purchases through the 3 service providers contracted with IHLA that could be seen as taxpayer dollars used on non-educational expenses. As an evolving education option, IHLA leaders say they are already working to make changes that ensure the virtual charter school is operating appropriately.
Oh, yes, for sure. We already have plans in place. We've every year, I think, gotten better at kind of putting those guardrails on and have plans for this coming year in our ESP contracts to make sure that those guardrails are even more clear and consistent across IHLA and all 3 partners.
Some purchases in the report raised concerns. A paddleboard for a parent is already a popular talking point. OPE found purchases that certainly fall in the category of misuse of dollars, but other purchases drawing questions do need context in terms of a student's learning plan and goals.
They really look at what people are requesting. Does it tie back to the student's schedule? Does it tie back to their learning goals? And so that there's an educational connection to the items that they are using.
Because IHLA parents will tell you, the school is uniquely positioned to help some students in ways that their local public school just isn't equipped to. Like a student struggling to learn in the traditional sense, skills like reading.
I'm gonna be honest, a teacher cannot do that for 30 students, but a parent can sit down and work with them for as much as time as needed and have that individual connection to go at that child's pace. And now she's in 7th grade and she still loves reading. Even though it's hard for her, she loves it. And
We do have these kids. We are supporting them with curriculum, with teachers. We have counselors, SPED services, 504. We have an amazing MTSS intervention program. And so these kids are getting served well.
Another topic. As a charter school, any unspent staffing funds can be redirected toward discretionary funds for IHLA. Questions now center on how the law should handle the reality that IHLA hired less than half of its allocated full-time equivalent staff in 2024-25. It's just what they needed, though, for that school year. It did result in a $16.1 million pool going to discretionary funding. Sorensen believes there needs to be a full conversation on the topic with lawmakers.
Funding's being used to educate kids. It's just in a different way. And she pointed out that most school districts, between 80 and 85% of their budget is those people components. If we don't have any leniency to use that money in any other discretionary way, again, you just did away with choice and innovation.
OPE's recommendations include developing a funding framework specific to virtual schools, addressing salary apportionment, attendance calculations, overhead costs, and unspent learning funds, while also setting clear parameters for supplemental learning funds, including defining acceptable uses. It's clear that Idaho law just was not specifically written with the innovation of virtual charter schools in mind.
Policy gray area. And we have always worked with the state to stay within it, but yes.
I like that exactly. We're playing a game with rules that don't apply to the game, and we're trying, right? And that's what I'm hoping that yesterday we made connections so that legislators will reach out and include us in decisions because, like she said, we are the biggest virtual school. We have experience and we're willing to adjust
How have we constructed the law to ensure that those tax dollars are going out in a transparent way and fairly, right? We scrutinize our public school districts to the max. And so it is essential that everybody's treated fairly, and that if we have multiple options, so be it, but they have to be fair and they all have to be accountable to the same taxpayers.
It's all about balance. It's finding rules that will direct, but also that won't restrict so much that will make it not worth it for these families, because then they'll not have the support of what we offer, and that would be sad as well.
And Idaho's governor did weigh in on this in the OPE report, saying there's an obligation to be responsible with taxpayer dollars, and he wants to keep an eye on these supplemental learning expenses and also tracking academic performance. He says that this is something the legislature needs to take a look at and make sure there are statutory safeguards that are consistent with Idaho law. And Brian, there are also some other questions about things like grades and test scores. The OPE report, for example, talked about how some metrics are lower than what would be seen in other schools. However, it was identifying that a lot of this is the first year students and on the take-up of going from the classroom to this virtual academy. It's kind of where they saw some gaps. And that is something that IHLA, speaking with their leadership, they're glad that OPE pointed this out so they can work on that. One more thing I did want to mention too is that money given to these education service providers that aren't spent, it didn't revert back to the state. It's something that the education service providers held on to that money.
That's
so it's
the
a major
question I was going to ask you. Is these service providers, these vendors, have also come under scrutiny in other states based on how they operate?
Right, and that is one thing that the law just doesn't cover. So there was criticisms of, well, they're just holding on to this money. And yes, you could argue maybe someone should have made a call and figured this out, but there was no mechanism to do that.
Okay, so during this House Bill 93, when we passed this school choice tax credit bill, and we've heard this whole thing, the parents are they're the ones who should be holding people accountable, and they should be one accountable. When it comes to what's allowed under that, I mean, how do we know those rules are set up for that program?
It's a great question, and when I talk to lawmakers, who some of them, on background, they say that we need to keep an extra eye on this, because if we're going to audit education dollars, it needs to be equal. So this type of looking at this program is something that is good in terms of taxpayer dollars, and everyone seems to agree we need to come to the table and figure it out. At the same time, though, Brian, you have folks that say these are not public taxpayer dollars, these are tax credits, so they say it's a different type of accountability.
Speaking of that, there's also with these vendors, points are allowed, and then parents are getting reimbursed for those points, so basically getting cash twice because of that. There's a lot to sort out through that, and hopefully we'll see some of that addressed in the legislative session. All right, thanks, Joe.